All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me out there? Well, actually, I don't think I can hear you guys. So hopefully you can hear me out there. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Scott Timonia. I am a senior account executive here at Coretek. I'm located in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I cover the Southeast territory for Coretek. Appreciate you guys coming on. We're partnering with Rubrik today on a conversation around securing SaaS applications from a backup and data protection perspective. And I wanted to pass it over to Drew Love, who is a longtime friend and partner over at Rubrik, to introduce himself, and then we'll jump in.
No, thanks, Scott. Yeah, we really appreciate everyone's time this afternoon. As Scott mentioned, I'm part of a specialty organization at Rubrik where we work with customers around SaaS applications and designing resiliency and recovery around those specific applications. So again, we appreciate the time today and looking forward to the conversation.
All right. Brian and Philip, over to you guys, and Eddie.
Oh yeah, Ryan Hinkleman, Senior Solution Architect here at Coretek Services. Have been in the space for many years now, and with Coretek for coming on a dozen, and really excited to kind of talk to this area of focus for Coretek with our partners today in Rubrik, and talk about how we can jointly protect your data together as part of a holistic security approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And my name is Philip Jones. I'm a solution architect as well, and a peer of Ryan on the team. I've been in the industry for 20+ years and have done a variety of events, including speaking events, but my main focuses and passions have been security and end user computing for the majority of my career. About half that on the customer side, all the way through Fortune 500, and a half on the partner side, the dark side, as I call it. Eddie?
Yeah, hi everyone. Eddie Wozlowski, Field CTO for our SaaS business for Rubrik. So happy to review with you Rubrik's capabilities as it relates to SaaS data protection.
Scott, do you really quickly want to talk to Coretek and who we are as partners to Rubrik?
Yeah, sure. So, so for anyone who is not familiar with Coretek, we are headquartered out of Detroit, Michigan. We are a national company. As you can see on this slide, we've got customers in many states across the country. We are a #1 Azure MSP and have lots. The specializations in Microsoft are kind of hard to see at the bottom, but we have a number of specializations around all things Microsoft, whether it's AI, whether it's Azure, AVD, and various areas. Microsoft is quite frankly our biggest partner. We do not partner with any other cloud providers in the industry. And so we have a lot of very good technical expertise and understanding of all things Microsoft. And our focus with our clients is really consulting, managed services, and also from a security perspective, we have a very mature security operations center, which we call Core Defend. So that's kind of a high level of who we are and some of the things that we do. Ryan, do you want to talk to the wheelhouse slide?
Yeah, sure. So some of the things we do at Coretek, you're going to see us focus squarely today on this leftmost column here with security and our partners Rubrik. But as Scott mentioned, we have a lot of capabilities that kind of align to AI transformation. So all of the co-pilots, even in that, some of them security oriented. Focusing a lot on Azure AI and all of the Gen AI journeys that so many of you are on as well. Solid foundations in cloud, specifically Azure, whether that be app modernization, lifts and shifts, some DevOps and automation pieces. Workspace, which is really that end user focused sector of our business, whether that be M365, and we're going to talk to some of that as a SaaS platform here shortly. Some of the security pieces that brings with it that relate back into actually to the security vertical, and then some of the end user compute pieces around virtual desktops, et cetera, which are, compelling strategy for security as well. And then, of course, we manage everything that we do, whether that be unified security through our Core Defend product, managed cloud, managed desktop services, really trying to bring that value to our customers and make sure that the solutions that they have are maintained with the utmost care. And our vision is really around some of that managed capability and managed security. And quite frankly, we find that managing a comprehensive security program and doing all of the things that you need to do, and we'll talk about kind of the 5 things of what those are a little bit later, has become increasingly complex for most organizations, overwhelmingly so. And so we've built our services and our products to extend to any workload platform, as we'll talk about, or device, and raise your security posture to the highest level possible and maintain it there, of course. And we want you to know that you can have confidence in knowing that what you have is managed, how it's configured, and that you're truly protected, and that you have a team behind you to meet a dynamic threat landscape that we'll talk about today. So Philip, if you want to talk to kind of maybe how Coretek does that and what our expertise specifically is in that security space.
No, absolutely. I really think we've got a fantastic team here that we've built. Coretek itself has been around for many, many years, and we started our experience in healthcare, delivering strong end user computing solutions and other solutions for our customers. But we've grown that and expanded that. We have a dedicated security team in practice in the organization, but we've expanded our verticals, and we do this on a lot of different customers. So we've implemented these solutions, designed them, architected across healthcare, financial, insurance, retail, manufacturing, and government, including supply chain in the defense industrial base. As an example, we have an elite security team with an average of over 10 years of experience per team member, including former law enforcement and military with real world threat knowledge and investigation experience. So they know how to tackle these issues. They know what the bad guys are doing to try to get in the environments. And we see that as part of our SOC, really, which we call Core Defend, because it's not just a SOC, it's more than that. When you're looking at holistically trying to protect your environment, improve your posture, your threat response, but it's a 24/7, 365 monitoring and threat response service with proactive threat detection and prevention and more. That gives us proven threat experience because we've dealt with scenarios where customers have been breached in some cases, not particularly our customers. Sometimes they'll come to us and say, hey, we've had this, and that's how we get engaged with many customers, because we're able to help them recover from these incidents as they occur. We are not an incident response firm or an IR firm because that's part of the separation of duties, but we can help with the recovery processes. We can help with the monitoring, the designing, the remediation, and the rebuilding. And Rubrik can be a key part of that recovery if you're already set up with them. Recovery is a very important part and part of the NIST cybersecurity framework. It's one of the core founding principles that you really need to make sure that you're understanding, because if something happens, and I don't want to even say if, I want to say when something happens, whether it's malicious or not, you need to know that you have the ability to recover and recover securely through like immutable backups and other capabilities within the Rubrik platform that Eddie and the team will be going over a little bit later today. But we understand those tactics, techniques, and procedures that are used by those threat actors. We have extensive experience in compliance and GRC, including we are ISO 27001, we're SOC 2 Type 2. We're also a CMMC RPO, Registered Practitioner Organization, which means we can consult on, the capabilities for customers who are trying to achieve CMMC certification, which means they also meet like NIST and other capabilities for the government customers in the defense industrial base supply chain. And really kind of last, we are a Microsoft MSSP partner with advanced certifications in security, threat protection, and cloud security. And we're also a member of Microsoft MISA, the Microsoft Intelligence Security Association, which consists of premier security partners and independent software vendors that is an invite-only program that gives customers benefits of offering a wider range of security offerings and improved integration between the tools and enhanced protection against threats. So Ryan, would you like to tell us a little bit maybe about what you saw in 2024 overall?
Sure. I think I've seen the same thing that a lot of people have seen. You don't really have to look all that far to see it because it has been plastered all over the headlines and has been directly impactful to so many people's lives. Obviously Ascension is one of the more recent ones where national healthcare system had to revert to paper records. I personally know several people in that org, and just hearing the routines that they had to go through to continue to provide patient care, the changes in procedures, the inefficiencies in doing so, and some of the risk that not having those modern processes, computer-driven processes for an extended period of time created was well beyond some of the financial toll, which is still to be found. We have all heard of Change Healthcare, and you've also probably heard it referred to as United Healthcare. That is racking up costs into the billions. We all heard last year about MGM, and the thing is, this is just the ones we hear about that make so much news. These are not the ones that are actually, I mean, these are the headlines, but this is really just the tip of the iceberg. But it underscores really the need and the desire of making sure that you're following the right principles to make sure that these impacts don't follow you. So really, kind of beyond the headlines, Philip, you're going to maybe talk to we all feel that increase, I think, from those headlines, but what are really statistics saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I did was I pulled from 3 different major industry reports in security. These are well-known reports, including the Microsoft Digital Defense Report, the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, or DBIR, and the IBM X-Force Cost of a Data Breach. So I'm going to touch on these pretty quickly. But one of the things, you mentioned a couple great examples, and these are big companies that we all know, and those are the ones that make the headlines. But about 70% of the organizations encountering ransomware had fewer than 500 employees. So this is important to every organization of every size. And I would argue that it's even more important to the smaller and mid-sized organizations and small enterprises because they don't have the bandwidth and the resources and monetary needs to be able to support their environment on their own typically. So that's why they need good partners. That's why they need good solutions like Rubrik to help them fill those gaps and be able to assist with those and recover quickly. 80 to 90% of all successful ransomware compromises came through unmanaged devices, and that may mean that they're not managing them with Intune or another solution. But we saw a significant increase in the shift in how they're attacking these environments. So it's important to really attack those. And we saw large attacks against identity and password-based attacks spiked in 2023 and 2024 so far as well. Ryan, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide.
Yeah, Philip, I was going to point out this is 2023 even, and I would say, obviously, I think we're all feeling a report yet to come out that it's even increased beyond that in 2024.
Absolutely. These things have gone up and up over time. They're not getting, everyone knows someone who was, attacked, or somebody in the industry. You're hearing your peers, maybe even your local companies that you're working with who's been affected by that. And the human element is an important factor of a breach because a lot of these are now coming in via phishing, social engineering. They're attacking the M365 platform, the SaaS platforms that companies are using, including Google and other services. So this isn't limited to Microsoft. I don't want anyone to think this is a Microsoft problem. This is a global problem for all services, and 83% of those breaches involved external actors, and the primary motivation now, it's no longer just trying to attack them and get information, but it's financially driven. So they're trying to get information, steal your data, or do ransomware within the environment, leading from stolen credentials, phishing, exploitation of vulnerabilities. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, Ryan. And really what we're seeing is ransomware is still the top outcome of those threat actors. I talked a little bit about the M365, but business email compromise attacks have almost doubled across the entire data set, as can be seen in figure 3 on the top right. We're seeing large increases, but ransomware is the top action that they're trying to do when they come in. And it's ubiquitous among organizations of all sizes and all industries. And we're seeing that and we're hearing it in real examples.
And I think it's important to point out, Philip, that business email, by and large, these days is becoming a shared SaaS service that we're going to kind of start pointing our focus at here in just a moment of how to protect that data.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide here, Ryan, and talk about the cost. What's the impact, right? If a company does get breached or they do have an attack. Now, this is an average. These numbers can vary considerably based upon the size, the breadth of the attack. Some of these can also put some companies out of business if they don't have the proper insurance or the other things in place to be able to potentially, stop the attack, reduce quickly. The cost on average is around $4.5 million, and that's growing. It grew 2.3% from 2022, and we're probably going to see that grow again when the 2024 reports come out. But we are seeing 51% of organizations are planning to increase their security investments because either they were breached or because someone they know was breached, or their industry. They're seeing these news lines. So more companies are starting to invest more and more. And the impact of that investment could be a savings of up to 1.76 million. So you could potentially save yourself 40% or more just by adding security components of security recovery with Rubrik to be able to recover faster, securely, with those immutable backups. Can you trust your backup, within the situation? Because I've encountered companies who did not have the appropriate backup solution, and they were restoring things that had already been compromised, because that's something the bad guys are going after in an environment. Ryan, I believe you have a couple examples you want to walk us through.
I do. Just like we talked about for in the previous slide, the business email compromise. I mean, you're seeing here it is a shared service. And so we're talking about M365 more generically, and I think we understand that to be a SaaS service today. And I think there's a large understanding that or misconception that we don't necessarily have to do anything. And I know Eddie will kind of talk to that later on what we really need to do to start protecting these. But here you can see Black Basta, who is responsible for several of those headlines, taking a hit to Capita for 31 million. And really what happens, hey, they targeted M365. Which is that SaaS platform. It's not unique to M365. Obviously, M365 has some key pieces of data that make it highly appealing, but it's certainly not the only SaaS platform out there that we care about. But typically, it does hold identity. It had regulatory impact to the customer. It downed their systems, much like we were talking to earlier with Ascension, creating some business outages, disruptions, etc. And of course, inevitably, someone from a leadership perspective lost their job because they weren't doing the type of things that they needed to be doing to protect themselves from these cyber attacks. And so I think next we'll maybe talk about what some of those things actually are. Oh, excuse me. First point we're going to make is you need to also understand that it's not just ransomware actors that are financially motivated. Nation states are by and large looking at scale against some of these cloud providers because of the level of information that can be had around matters of interest for them. That could be IP, it could be intelligence information. So certainly there is some counterintelligence going on. You can see here the Five Eyes of intelligence are responding to this. They're putting out joint advisories, but people are getting craftier. They're putting residential proxies in and trying to go after this information. They're disguising their attacks. Just underscoring the scale at which this is happening, the capability of the threat actors, and really the importance that, truly it's not necessarily when, if you have these motivated parties in there, or excuse me, it's not if, it's when. So we really need to be prepared from all aspects of our business and on all platforms to respond fully to these types of threats. So how do we do that, Philip?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we can do, or 5 of the things that we can do to help protect against 99% of attacks, are really kind of the fundamentals of cyber hygiene. This isn't all you need to do, but this is going to help protect you by applying these 5 simple principles to your organization. Enable multi-factor authentication, including modern auth with phish-resistant credentials. Apply zero trust principles using things like least privilege access models applied to the entire technology stack. Utilize extended detection and response, or XDR, and anti-malware solutions within your environment. Understand your coverage and gaps and know how to address them, and keep up to date. Keeping up to date is extremely important. Understanding your posture management for compliance, the health of devices, services, and assets. 0-day vulnerabilities do happen, but you want to make sure you want to address those as quickly as possible to mitigate potential incidents within the environment. And the last one, and I think this is probably one of the least understood in many organizations, is protect your data. And protect your data doesn't apply just to files or servers or other devices, but you want to protect your SaaS platforms and cloud platforms as well. You want to have automatic cloud backup, file syncing for users, protect your business critical, and understand what's business critical for your organization within the environment. And now I want to turn it back over to Rubrik and Eddie to kind of go through the Rubrik side and talk about their services and capabilities and platforms and how they enhance this.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for spending some time with us. So as I mentioned, I have responsibilities of being our field CTO for Rubrik for our SaaS business. And as such, we get to see a lot, and I myself get to see a lot as it relates to the threats against 365. And it's not just me. Rubrik as a business has our own Zero Labs group, which is a team of folks that are dedicated to understand kind of the threat landscape and see what's happening as it relates to SaaS and the threats against it. And it's very much around this, as we've been talking about, this whole idea of social engineering and trying to get access to privileged credentials, and the way in which we've historically invested around data protection. While a key component, again, that the Coretek folks have talked about, of data protection, it's not the end all be all, because the underlying data, if we get access to it, can bypass those other perimeter control capabilities. So let's talk a little bit about kind of Rubrik and kind of what we're doing. So if we go to the next slide, that'd be awesome. So SaaS data protection, or data protection, is not new to us. We've been doing this for about over 10 years now, and recently become a publicly traded company, which is super exciting. But we've really established ourselves as a big player in the SaaS data protection world, and customers rely on us for 365, Jira, and we're soon to be releasing Salesforce data protection in the next couple of weeks, which is a major accomplishment. Because of the complexity of that system and the wide usage of it, just like 365. So go to the next slide there, please. So if you haven't heard of Rubrik, we, again, like I said, just became a publicly traded company, but have been widely recognized as a leader in the space for IDC, Gartner, as well as Microsoft, as it relates to our data protection capabilities. And it's not just data protection, it's this recovery mechanism, right? There are a multitude of organizations that are out there that talk about SaaS data protection and backups and all of those kinds of things. But if you really think about it, the reason you back up is so that you have an ability to recover, and thinking about your recovery mechanisms and strategies. And this is what has gained such credibility for us and such notoriety. If you go to the next slide, Microsoft themselves is actually an equity stake investor in our business. As we looked at, or as Microsoft looked at the data security landscape and the need to add some additional resiliency capabilities, investing us really made sense. And we have built and co-engineered a multitude of solutions, and one of which being the 365 data platform that I'm going to talk about here in just a little bit. So it's really important, if I give a number of talks and number of presentations, and really the question that I ask of any executive or attendee of my sessions is to talk about or to think about either of these scenarios. What's your strategy? If social engineering were to take place tomorrow, what do you do? What's your recovery mechanism? Because I'll tell you, the biggest questions we get asked are, what data was impacted? Do I need to recover? If I need to recover, how quickly can I do it? Right? And what's my downtime going to be associated with that activity? Or if somebody deleted data, if someone made an advertent administrative change that caused a large deletion of data, what's the strategy, right? Because the answers that I get to this, if we go to the next slide, is largely around utilizing Microsoft's native capabilities. And what we'll find is, if you build the slide out, it's totally fine. If we talk about some of the things as it relates to these misconceptions, is what Microsoft is doing is really giving you this mechanism to understand who you are, and based on that role, what data you should have access to, how long that data should live in your ecosystem, and what's your retirement mechanism. Is it being archived, deleted, et cetera, right? And these tools that help you manage and really get an understanding of that data, while very important tools, can actually be used as mechanisms to further extend the scope of the attack. Retiring retention, retiring archive, emptying the recycle bin, and those kinds of things. And Microsoft natively doesn't have an ability to really roll back the data because of their replication methodology within 365. For high availability purposes, there's no ability to really roll back the data. So we have to have a data mechanism, a protection mechanism in place. If you go to the next slide. And that's largely because of their strategy that I talked about in terms of data management, right? That we kind of talked about in terms of knowing the data, knowing where it is, and all those kinds of things. And by the way, if you are thinking about Copilot, and as that being an attractive tool for your business, the key to a successful Copilot environment is this whole idea of understanding the data. That has you to look at the validity of your MIP labels. Are you actually tagging data? Where does that exist, so that when you're turning on Copilot, you get the best usability of data? But also, if we go to the next slide, thinking about this shared responsibility model that exists between you as a user of the service and Microsoft as the provider. Because they give you these infrastructure level tools, these administrative tools to help you manage and organize the data, but you're the user, the content is yours, right? Microsoft doesn't want to touch that, right? They don't want to manage that for you because of a number of different reasons. But because of that, you have to put in your own data protection strategies, right? All of the things that we talked about in terms of perimeter security and network security, but also protecting the underlying data itself. So you can go to the next slide. So these threats, they're pretty consistent, right? And historically, we've talked about like data encryption methodologies and mechanisms, but it's really exfiltration. Threat actors are trying to get, you can go past that slide. Threat actors are trying to get access to data to exfiltrate it. And if you look at kind of your native recovery mechanisms, whether that's a retention policy, if you build another slide there where you utilize litigation hold, these are mechanisms to really, again, think about how you're retaining data, how you're managing data, and those kinds of things. They're not recovery mechanisms, right? So we want to avoid the double extortion attempt, right? Because that's what they're doing, right? They're going to figure out, we're going to get access, we're going to pull the data out, and we're going to say, pay me, or I'm going to put it on the dark web. You make a payment, and they say, okay, if you want the data back, you got to pay me again. I don't want the second one. I want to try to figure out ways in which I can prevent the data exfiltration, which is all around, understanding the data, where it is, who has access, and those kinds of things. But I also want to have a recovery mechanism to avoid that double extortion. And because we don't know Microsoft, we know Microsoft doesn't have a native recovery mechanism. We have to think about our own recovery mechanism, which is largely where Rubrik is going to come in. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about the Rubrik Security Cloud, which is the application that Rubrik has been selling for several years now, and has a number of key components if you think about it from a data protection mechanism. We're backing up all of the data across Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. This also can exist for other data sources like Salesforce and Jira to be able to offer the same types of capabilities here in terms of putting the data in a resilient, air-gapped, immutable format in an environment that's managed by Rubrik, where we're enabling role-based access controls to help you manage who can do what, and have the ability to lock the retention of those backups so that a threat actor cannot prematurely expire those backups. But this is kind of like table stakes, right? You look at, and you if you were to search and say, I want to look for a data 365 or SaaS data protection vendor, you'd find a multitude of hits here. But if we go to the next slide, we really start thinking about like this whole idea of cyber RTOs and cyber recovery. Well, what does cyber recovery mean, right? Well, it's understanding like what's the most critical data, right? Where does it live? What are the most important users, so that we can get a good understanding of this information in the event of peacetime, to see how it's kind of trending over time, but in the event of wartime, what's been affected? And based on what's been affected and impacted, what's our ability to go through the recovery process? So giving you the mechanism or the capability to understand where critical data lives in the environment is a really important part of cyber recovery. And if we go to the next slide, the other part of it too is your users. If you've ever gone through the process of deleting a user in Active Directory or Entra ID, you know the pain associated with trying to execute a recovery, right? So all the attributes that are specific to Entra, the relationship between Entra and an Active Directory environment on-prem, is really kind of challenging, because if you delete a group, you're deleting the corresponding SharePoint sites and other data elements. If you're deleting the user, their Exchange environment or Exchange and OneDrive accounts become orphaned from them as users. So there's really a lot of challenges there associated with identity. But the other part of it is, if we go to the next slide, this is a really interesting concept that we've just introduced in terms of technology with the product, and it's all around operationalizing or orchestrating a recovery. Because if you think about if an environment has been compromised, one of the questions that I was talking you through in terms of the ones that we've been asked, what's been affected, do I have to recover? If I have to recover, how long it's going to take, those kinds of things. But the other is, if my environment has been compromised, should I recover back to that environment? Have I gone through and done all of the triaging and investigation necessary to give me confidence that I should recover there? Or should I have an alternative tenant where I'm going to execute my recovery process? If that's the case, or even if we're just doing a regular recovery, we kind of have to rebuild things, right? If identity has been compromised, well, I want to recover the most important users that are going to be responsible for executing a recovery. So I'm going to go and look at those first users first and recover them. But I want to get their emails and OneDrive accounts and their calendars back up, because they want to orchestrate and understand what's going on in the business. But I don't want to recover everything all at the same time. I just want maybe the last 7 or 8 days. I do that. I compress the time that it takes for me to recover. Those users are up and running. They then kind of cascade down the process, potentially working with a business group that has an understanding of the critical data that needs to be recovered, thereby, orchestrating the next recovery based on the age or last modification of something like SharePoint sites or SharePoint data, and you kind of cascade down the process, so that at no point is the environment down, do folks not have access, and that you're minimizing any kind of any time that's associated with downtime. This is different.
Eddie,
this is kind of the next step.
We had a question come in that
Fantastic.
sort of goes to this. So if you recovery time is one thing, but if somebody has a massive amount of data in their environment, what does that initial backup time look like in order to protect this data?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it depends on the size of your environment. It depends on the number of API calls that we have available to us and things of that nature. We actually have calculators based on the amount of content and things. I will tell you, for large enterprises, we can import or onboard about 10,000 users a day. So it just kind of depends, but that's, again, a large environment. We have a lot of API calls. We have a lot of horsepower that we can throw behind it. But again, it kind of depends. But we have organizations operational in a matter of weeks. From like the initial, when you set up the product, the initial index and backup.
Do I need to own a Rubrik platform in order to use this SaaS backup tool, or is this standalone?
This can be standalone.
Okay.
So, but if you're an existing Rubrik customer and you have the Rubrik Security Cloud already, you're just adding this to your inventory in the application.
Got it. Okay, I'll let you know if there's anything else that comes in.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, so let's, if you would allow me to share, let's go through and show you a little bit of the product here in action. So there we go, perfect. So I'm going to share out because I want to make sure we're leaving enough time for us to be able to go through any kind of Q&A and those kinds of things. So let's kind of show this live. And Scott, if you can tell me my screen is coming across, that'd be fantastic. You see this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the 365 interface, and as I'll show, and you get a feel for, all the capabilities that I talked about and the rich set of functionality. The great thing here is the time to value. The time it takes to get this stood up is really quite short. And really all it is a mechanism for us to be able to connect to 365. We do so through modern authentication or OAuth. We give you the ability to select the primary Azure region of where you want the data to live, or we can use the user's preferred data location. If you're an international business and you want to look at GDPR compliances and others, we can do that as well. And you can also bring your own Azure decryption keys for the data. By default, we own those, but you can bring them if you want to as a part of a zero trust type of methodology and practice. But once we go through and we add the subscription, right? I clicked off that too soon. Once we click and add, then what we do is we make the initial ingestion, right? So we do the initial index of data, and that's kind of, as they say, the longest pole in the tent. And takes the longest time for us to be able to go through that initial ingestion. But again, we've streamlined the process pretty well to onboard customers rather quickly. Once we get to about 50-60% of the way, the button here that says assign SLA domain will appear. And an SLA domain with Rubrik, if you've never talked to or heard about this before, it's just an ability to create a policy around how you're backing up the data, how often we're doing it, how long we're keeping it for, those kinds of things. And these can be applied at the application layer, where we're showing here with Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams, or it can be applied at the user level or the container level in terms of, SharePoint sites and Teams channels, et cetera. But if I go through this process and just show and say, okay, what does an SLA domain look like? It's here where we just have, the base frequency and the retention, and we ship this kind of bronze, gold, silver out of the box, but you can create your own. Depending on the rate of change, depending on data criticality, all of those kinds of things, you can create your own SLA domain. Right? Very simple and easy to do. So as I said, you can apply those, as I showed, at the kind of the workload level, or if we get into the demonstration here, or I'm sorry, where it says enter Rubrik demo, that would be your tenant name. We can provide the level of granularity in terms of individual users, individual sites and site collections, or Teams channels. So ability here to kind of mix and match or individual groups. So, again, very simple, right? We're applying these policies, we get them up and running, off and going. And the recovery process, right, is kind of where the rubber meets the road. And that's really around, if you're good at this, providing flexibility dependent on the requirement. So let's say Adam here, we accidentally delete an email. Okay, well, I can go through and I can do some searches within Adam's mailbox to find it. Or if he says, hey, I had it in June and I don't have it in July. Okay, well, let's go back to the last backup in June, select recover, and here I have the ability to select different objects, right? Things out of the mailbox, calendar, contacts. I can recover his entire mailbox, or I can drill down into specific attributes within his mailbox, find whatever it may be, and select next. And here we've got options, right? Is Adam still on that project that's associated with that email? Is there someone else that's been assigned to it? Do I have an audit where I don't want to go through recovery, I just want to download it? Or do I want to recover it to an alternative subscription? Right? So a lot of flexibility here in terms of your recovery scenarios. Right? If I select, hey, this is just going right back to Adam, great. Do I want to create a new version? Do I want to overwrite it? Or do I want to recover it to a new folder? Again, different strokes for different folks, right? I like the idea of recovering it to a new folder because it gives structure. It puts it into the mailbox and helps direct the user to where it is. But if you want to overwrite it just like it was in the mailbox, you can do that as well. Anything and everything we're doing is managed in our events tabs. So it can give you an understanding of who's doing what. These can be exported to SIM and SOAR tools and those kinds of things. So really straightforward as far as that's concerned. And the last thing that I'll show before I open it up to questions is I talked about that operational recovery piece, right? Let's say we have an outage and we have groups of users that we want to recover, right? Because those are going to be the people that are responsible for orchestrating the recovery process. Well, if I say, okay, they're in IT, I've got people in there and I've got their OneDrive accounts and their Exchange mailboxes. Well, I want to recover their entire group. And as a part of this mass recovery, I could select and say, well, I want to enable my operational recovery here, where I'm just recovering data from the last few days. So I get a large group of users and a small subset of data that helps me expedite my recovery process, gets me up and running, gets me kind of what's most recently happening, and then allows me to cascade and recover all of the other stuff once I've completed this recovery process. Right. So different strategies here based on different recovery objectives, RTOs, RPOs, all of those kinds of things. The Rubrik Security Cloud, our 365 protection, has it built in to be able to accommodate all of those specific types of requests. So that's kind of, just kind of the high level overview. We'd love to be able to partner with you all to show you a little bit more based on specific use cases and scenarios and things of that nature. But just to give you a little teaser around the application, hopefully this gives you an understanding of why thousands of organizations have relied on us to protect millions and millions of users and petabytes of data within the application.
So if there are any additional questions, you can drop them in the Q&A and we can answer those for anybody that's on. I do have another question though, actually two, and it falls in line with what you showed before, Eddie, on recovering email or a mailbox. If a user's deleted or removed from AD, how do you handle that?
Yep.
Because that's
great question.
more of a broad picture of that user, right?
Yeah, so it happens all the time, right? We have people that move, that change jobs, that are let go, that leave. So in the very bottom left-hand corner here, you'll see this status, and this is what we call active and relic. Well, we're protecting all of our active users, but those users that are deleted out of AD, we still need to maintain their backups, right? We need to maintain their data for compliance purposes, retention purposes, et cetera. So they're automatically converted from an active to a relic status thereby freeing up a license that you can reassign to another user, but we're maintaining or keeping the backups of those users based on the SLA domain that you had previously assigned to that user. So we're still maintaining all of the data despite the change of their active status in 365.
And then Microsoft has some native tools, right, that folks can use for some of this type of data. How does Rubrik compare to native tools from a functionality and maybe a cost perspective? Is there a cost savings with Rubrik?
Yeah, so Microsoft is doing some interesting things here. As I said, given our relationship, we're very aware of their development strategies and data protection strategies. They're releasing an archiving mechanism as well as what they call backup storage or 365 backup storage. That releases a new set of APIs that Rubrik as a partner gains access to that can accelerate recovery speeds for larger data sets. Microsoft does have a first party kind of offering, but typically customers that are looking to protect multiple data assets, 365, data center, content, information, and cloud, the recommendation is to unify within an ISV platform like ours. So we have access to those and can use them. Often finding, you get the kind of the best of both worlds, the data resiliency of us and the speed of recovery for Microsoft. From a costing perspective, yeah, it's a little bit different. Their structure is a little bit different. It's kind of a pay-as-you-go model. We do TCO analysis with organizations to determine kind of what's the best fit based on the use cases and requirements.
Eddie, I have
Any other?
that I would like to kind of ask / draw attention to. In certain scenarios where Rubrik becomes extremely valuable, certainly the stress level that an organization and thus the operators of solutions like this may be under an intense amount of stress and strain, and taking actions that aren't everyday actions as far as orchestrated recoveries, et cetera. I know that Rubrik has considered that and actually has some expertise kind of built into the product in the form of an escalation team, right?
Yeah, it's one of the things that I now in hindsight should have covered in my deck, but talking about our rapid response team. So in partnering with Coretek, have the ability to provide escalation mechanisms from a recovery standpoint. So we have a dedicated team of engineers that their sole job is to help organizations recover. They're deployed roughly twice a week within our customer base to be able to help them execute recoveries. As you can imagine from something that happened last week, we were integral in a number of recoveries for organizations. And this team, again, dedicated to helping you recover. So in the event of an outage, it's reaching out to us along with the Coretek team to be able to help you get back on your feet again. And this team is they've got lines into Microsoft's Dart team and escalation points with us internally to be able to help triage and execute the recoveries needed based on what we're looking for.
And for those who don't know, Microsoft Dart is their incident response firm. I talked about the separation of duties. They are the security incident response who comes in when something happens and it's a major event, you declare it and you need someone to start getting in there and look at those forensics and understand and help you guide you through that process.
I think it's telling that, if I'm operationally, this doesn't happen to me every day. This is the first time that it's going to be happening. And it's nice to know I have that additional level of expertise that somebody that does it twice a week. And this is, very familiar to them on my side and helping me leverage the tools and capabilities appropriately to really minimize that recovery window.
Yeah, well said.
So Ryan, if you want to just quickly go back to if you can take over and go back to the bottom of the deck, I did have a slide on there that's got my contact info as well as Drew's. And if anybody wants to screenshot that, you're welcome to reach out to either of us. Again, I cover the Southeast for Coretek, which is essentially Louisiana over to Florida and up to Tennessee. We do have a number of other account executives that cover other regions in the country, and I can certainly put you in contact with whomever covers accounts in other states. So by all means, feel free to reach out. And Drew, you want to cover just real quick? What's your entire patch?
Yeah, so very similar. Yeah, very similar to yourself, Scott. So I'm kind of Southeast, but again, I'm part of a national team, so we can certainly connect you with other folks. But yeah, I predominantly work across the Southeast, and yeah, a lot of different types of follow-up, as Scott was mentioning. We can do a more deeper dive, more architecture kind of review. Happy to do a one-on-one demo, if you will. We also have, Eddie was kind of alluding to, some tools not only to kind of help from an onboarding perspective, but we got some scripts that we're able to run across environments to really help understand, the scope and how you're using the applications, to how to kind of size things that are pretty easy to run and give us an idea of kind of what your environment looks like, right?
Yeah. And beyond that, from a Coretek perspective, we can help anyone with, I'll call it a security maturity assessment, right? Where we help you kind of understand where you are, where you want to be, and help you understand that, and also help you understand gaps and help remediate those, right? Show you how to remediate them, assist in remediation, et cetera. So there's really a lot we can do if we were to deep dive on anything that anybody needs specifically. But as I mentioned, feel free to screenshot this. I think we will have the ability to share this deck out to everybody that joined after the webinar, and of course share it with coworkers, counterparts, and anybody that might be interested in hearing or seeing this. And if there are no more questions, I will definitely want to say thank you to everyone that came on today. We hope this was beneficial and educational. And we look forward to hearing from anybody that wants to take a deeper dive. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott, Eddie, Philip, Ryan. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. Take care.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.